Picture this. You are standing right in the middle of a beautiful sunlit artist's studio.
Oh, I can picture it.
Yeah, and the smell of linseed oil, mineral spirits, and maybe some settled dust is just heavy in the air.
Best smell in the world.
Right. But right in front of you, resting on this heavy wooden easel, is a massive Felix brand canvas. It's imposing, like 70 by 90 centimeters.
It is a big canvas.
Huge. And the fabric is stretched perfectly taut over the frame. So tight it would literally hum if you flicked it.
Yeah.
It is pristine, untouched, and if we're being completely honest, terrifyingly blank.
It really is. I mean, that pure factory white surface represents absolute infinite potential. You could create literally anything on it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it is this massive psychological trap, you know? The sheer emptiness of that space is pure intimidation.
And well, that empty space is exactly what we are tackling today. We're doing a deep dive into a masterclass document titled simply Abstracto Turquesa.docs.
A fascinating document.
It really is. Because it completely shatters the whole romantic idealized myth of how abstract art is actually made. I mean, we all have this movie cliche idea in our heads, right?
Oh, definitely. The tortured artist having a sudden emotional outburst.
Exactly. Finally throwing buckets of paint at a canvas, and boom, a masterpiece is miraculously born.
Which couldn't be further from the truth. The methodology laid out by GRUPO RAIM proves that abstract art is a calculated, methodical construction.
Right.
It is highly engineered, and that engineering has to start the exact second you face that blank canvas, because that empty space is where the first major battle is fought. And sadly, it's where most beginners lose before they even really start.
So let's talk about that beginner's urge, because the instinct is to see the final result immediately, right? They want the gratification of the image.
Of course, it's human nature.
So they grab their most expensive, most brilliant final colors, or maybe like a piece of dark charcoal to sketch out a design, and they just apply it directly to that raw, unprimed canvas.
Which sounds logical to a layperson.
Yeah. I mean, you have a canvas, you put paint on it. It seems simple.
But physically and chemically doing that is a disaster.
Really? Why?
Well, to understand why, we have to look at the physical logic of raw cotton or linen at a microscopic level. A raw canvas just isn't smooth.
It looks smooth from far away, though.
It does, but microscopically, it's this landscape of aggressive friction. It's basically fine sandpaper, and worse, it acts like a violently thirsty sponge.
Oh, wow. Okay, so if you take a piece of charcoal to raw canvas.
Those microscopic pores permanently trap the charcoal dust. You can never fully erase it. It leaves this dead, grayish smear that ruins the inner luminosity of the fabric forever.
Ouch.
Yeah. And applying acrylic paint directly is even worse. That thirsty raw cotton violently sucks the liquid binder right out of the paint via capillary action.
Oh, I see. Leaving the actual color pigment just stranded on the surface.
Exactly. And once it's stranded, the color dies. It becomes dull, chalky, and just totally flat. Plus, the physical friction is so high that your brush gets stuck. You can't glide at all. You're just scrubbing against these rough fibers.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Doing that is essentially like trying to build a heavy 3-story brick house directly on loose dirt or shifting sand, right?
Abstract great way to put it.
If you don't dig down and pour a concrete foundation first, the whole thing is just going to crack and sink into the earth. You absolutely must pour the foundation.
And the professional solution begins exactly there. To conquer that virgin canvas, Rodolfo M. completely avoids using a pure, sterile white straight from a tube.
Right, because that would be far too cold and clinical, wouldn't it?
Exactly. Instead, the process begins by mixing a highly specific warm cream base. It's mostly titanium white, but with a barely perceptible touch of yellow ochre mixed in.
Oh, nice.
Just enough to give it a warm, almost bone-like glow.
The warmth makes sense, but the application method is what really stood out to me.
There.
They don't use a tiny, precise brush to make it perfectly smooth.
No, not at all.
They sweep a wide brush or even a sponge across the entire 70 by 90 surface. And they deliberately leave imperfections, like they actually want tiny valleys and crests in the texture of that cream base.
Right, because a perfectly smooth surface is a dead surface. We aren't painting the sterile wall of a hospital corridor, you know?
Right.
By using a sponge or a wide brush, they establish organic variations in the thickness of the paint. Those textured imperfections are what the document calls the first heartbeat of the painting.
I love that phrase, the first heartbeat. So the canvas goes from being this dead, intimidating void to something that is actually breathing.
Yes. The raw, thirsty pores of the cotton are now completely sealed by the acrylic polymer of the cream base.
So the surface isn't a trap anymore. It has a warm temperature, a subtle living texture, and it's finally ready to accept the architecture of the painting.
Exactly. Now the foundation is poured, the canvas is sealed, warm, and luminous. But we are left with a completely flat, glowing block of cream light.
Right. And here is where it gets really interesting, but also kind of confusing. If you introduce darkness now, aren't you just muddying that pristine cream base we just spent all this time building?
It does feel like that, doesn't it?
Yeah. Why is the very next step in the methodology to literally dirty it up with dark colors? It feels like an act of vandalism against your own work.
It definitely seems counterintuitive.
Yeah.
That is, until you look at the fundamental artistic principle of shadow architecture.
Shadow architecture. Okay.
Yeah, a painting needs depth, right? It needs 3 dimensions. Physically, in the visual arts, you cannot carve a 3-dimensional shape out of a flat plane of light without introducing darkness.
Because light doesn't exist without shadow.
Exactly. You literally have to build the shadow in order to define where the light is. You have to destroy the flatness to create space.
But you can't just, like, squeeze thick, opaque black paint straight from the tube and smear it on. That would just be a dead black stain.
Way too heavy. To maintain the luminosity, Maestro uses a black acrylic that is so heavily diluted with water, it almost looks like tinted water, like a ghostly ink.
Wow, okay.
And they press it softly onto the canvas with a sponge. They aren't painting solid objects, you see. They are mapping out the spatial skeleton of the piece.
Creating ghostly, translucent clouds of depth that sink into the cream background rather than sitting heavily on top of it.
Exactly, they are mapping out the voids. And they don't stop at black. Instantly, another color is introduced right into this shadowy skeleton, a heavily bluish gray.
Okay, so now we aren't just dealing with light versus dark. We are dealing with thermal tension.
Yes, that specific color choice, bluish gray against the yellow ochre, is where the spatial illusion truly takes hold.
Because of how our eyes work, right?
Right. Human optics process warm colors as advancing or moving forward toward the viewer, and cool colors as receding or moving away. So by placing the cold blue-gray into the shadows, a massive push-pull effect is created on a flat surface.
Oh, this is exactly like high-end cooking.
Oh, how so?
Well, if a Michelin star chef serves a dense, incredibly rich, bittersweet chocolate dessert, they almost always sprinkle coarse sea salt right on top.
Oh, right.
The salt isn't there to make the dessert taste salty. The harsh shock of the salt on your palate forces your brain to perceive the deep sweetness of the chocolate on a much more profound level.
That is a brilliant analogy. Visually, the warm yellow ochre of the cream base is the sweetness. It is the heat.
And the cold bluish-gray of the shadows acts as the sea salt.
Exactly. The warm background clashes violently but beautifully with the cold shadows. It creates this silent, vibrating dialogue of temperatures across the canvas.
So the invisible architecture is no longer just flat light. It's deeply sophisticated, layered, and loaded with thermal tension.
Precisely. So the stage is set. We have our luminous cream background, our ghostly black spatial skeleton, and the thermal tension of the cold blue-gray.
But we still haven't touched the main color, the turquoise.
Right. And if you slap bright turquoise right over those dark blue-gray and black shadows right now, the darkness will swallow the color.
Oh, it would look super muddy and dull.
Yeah. So before the turquoise arrives, the methodology requires the creation of clarities or highlights. You have to layer translucent white paint over and around the specific dark zones where you want the final color to really pop.
It's like installing internal spotlights inside the painting, shining outward from the background to illuminate the color from behind.
I love that, installing the lighting rig before the actors take the stage.
Exactly. But this brings us to a massive chemical trap. How do you make acrylic paint transparent enough to act as a spotlight without just painting a solid white block?
Yeah, that's the big question.
The beginner instinct is just to take a cup of tap water and dump it into the white paint until it's thin and watery.
Which is a fatal chemical error.
Really, just water.
Yeah. See, acrylic paint isn't just color. It's a highly engineered emulsion. It consists of microscopic pigment particles suspended in a liquid plastic polymer, an acrylic resin.
Okay.
That polymer is the glue that forms a flexible matrix. It locks the pigment to the canvas and holds the entire painting together. When you drown that emulsion in tap water, you sever the polymer chains.
Oh, so you've completely destroyed the structural integrity of the glue.
Exactly. The paint might look okay while it's wet, but when that massive amount of water evaporates, the binder is basically gone. The pigment is left entirely unbound.
Making it chalky, brittle, and dusty.
Yep. run your finger over it a week later, and it will literally flake right off the canvas. The structure is completely compromised.
So it's almost like taking a brightly colored cotton t-shirt and washing it in a heavy dose of bleach.
Ooh, another good analogy.
Right. The physical fabric might survive the wash, but the color is completely degraded. It looks sad, old, and ruined.
Exactly. So to avoid destroying the paint's structural integrity, El Gran Artista relies on a specific chemical additive, a glazing medium.
A glazing medium, what is that exactly?
It's essentially the exact same acrylic polymer resin that makes up the paint, just without any color pigment added to it.
Oh. So by mixing the white paint with the glazing medium, the paint is stretched. It becomes incredibly thin and translucent, but the chemical bonds are maintained.
Right. The paint remains elastic, structurally strong, and it dries with a beautiful, luminous gloss instead of a dead, chalky finish.
So if the tap water was the bleach, using the glazing medium is like putting a piece of flawlessly tinted glass right in front of a powerful theatrical spotlight.
Yes.
The light pierces through the glass entirely intact, without losing any of its power, but it takes on a beautiful new atmosphere.
Perfect way to visualize it. So now the ecosystem is perfectly primed, the foundation is sealed, the thermal tension is humming, the internal spotlights are chemically locked in and glowing.
And now, the protagonist finally enters the stage. The turquoise.
Finally. And it enters not as a heavy-handed layer, but applied in thin, watery veils over this complex, prepared ecosystem.
And because it's applied in translucent veils, the turquoise interacts optically with everything underneath it, right?
Exactly. Where the turquoise flows over the black skeleton, it becomes this deep, vibrating, mysterious ocean color.
And where it shifts over the cold blue-gray, it cools down and recedes into the background.
And where it touches those chemically suspended white spotlights.
It absolutely explodes with light. The turquoise illuminates from within.
It really does. Up until this exact moment in the process, the entire painting has been a masterful optical illusion. It's been entirely about tricking the human eye into perceiving deep atmospheric 3D space on a perfectly flat 70 by 90 centimeter piece of fabric.
But then, the document reveals a massive shift. The illusion of depth is suddenly no longer enough.
No, it isn't.
The process becomes wildly, almost violently physical. The painting demands actual dimension.
This is where GRUPO RAIIM introduces a completely new material into the ecosystem, a heavy metallic acrylic known as ororico, or rich gold.
Orico, I love how that sounds.
Right. And more importantly than the gold itself, the delicate veils of color are over. The brush is abandoned.
Abandoned completely.
Yeah.
I mean, spatulas and palette knives are standard for heavy impasto work, sure, but then they bring in something completely out of left field.
Oh, yeah, this part is wild.
After dragging thick, heavy masses of this rich gold paint across the canvas with a rigid metal spatula, actually feeling the physical resistance of the heavy paint fighting back against their hand, they bring in a pastry bag.
A literal pastry bag.
Exactly like a baker decorating a wedding cake. They fill this pastry bag with pure, unthinned acrylic paint, and they use it to extrude thick, heavy, three-dimensional cords of pure gold directly onto the surface of the canvas.
The physical logic of extruding thick cords of paint is just revolutionary. The painting has stopped being a passive flat image. It has acquired literal, measurable topography. It has mountain ridges and deep valleys of paint. It is a 3D sculpture on a 2D plane.
And because it has literal topography, it begins to interact with the real physical world.
Yes. Think about it. When you take this finished piece and hang it in a room, those thick extruded crests of gold will interact with the actual rotation of the Earth.
Oh, wow.
As the Earth rotates, the ambient light in the room shifts. Morning sunlight streaming through a window will hit those raised gold ridges from a low angle. It casts real, physical, elongated shadows across the flat turquoise background.
That is incredible. And then at noon, the light hits it directly and the gold flashes brilliantly.
Exactly. And at night, if you turn on a warm incandescent lamp in the corner of the room, the shadows shift again, filling the deep valleys of paint with darkness. The painting literally breathes and changes shape as the room changes around it.
But building those massive mountains of acrylic paint comes with a pretty severe physical catch, doesn't it?
Oh, definitely. That thick polymer doesn't dry in 20 minutes like the thin veils of turquoise did. Thick masses of extruded acrylic dry from the outside in.
So the outside layer polymerizes quickly upon contact with the air, creating a tough, impermeable plastic skin. But the inside remains completely wet.
Right, and the volume of the paint mass will inevitably shrink as the water trapped inside that plastic skin eventually escapes.
So if the artist rushes the process,
The tension of that escaping moisture will cause the entire ridge of paint to split and tear open. It requires immense patience. Curing can take days or even weeks.
and while the gold is curing, there is one final critical adjustment to make. I mean, an amateur would step back, look at the shiny, thick gold and the glowing turquoise, and consider the piece finished.
True, but Rodolfo M. recognizes a new visual imbalance. By adding that intense, highly reflective gold and that exploding turquoise, the original ghostly black shadows from the very beginning of the process suddenly look weak by comparison.
Like the high notes of the painting are now so loud that you can't hear the bass anymore.
Exactly. They have to dive straight back into the darkness.
So they go back in.
Yes. Maestro takes that deeply diluted black water again and reapplies it specifically to the maximum points of shadow. They are actively pushing the darkness deeper.
Stretching the visual contrast between those towering, tactile ridges of bright gold and the deep, flat voids of shadow to its absolute physical limit.
Right. They are making sure the foundation can actually support the massive visual weight of the gold.
Wow. So the tension is finalized. The painting is complete. And honestly, when we take a step back from this masterclass and view the entire process from a distance, it fundamentally alters your visual hard drive.
It really does. It changes how your brain processes a canvas.
You realize that a finished abstract painting isn't a spontaneous miracle that happened in 5 minutes.
Not at all. It is a complex, meticulously engineered archaeological site. Every single visible millimeter of turquoise or gold on the surface is only able to exist because it is supported by deep strata of birdie decisions.
Chemical decisions about polymers and glazing mediums. Physical decisions about friction, raw cotton, and escaping moisture.
And thermal decisions about yellow ochre and blue-gray. El Gran Artista leaves us with a profound understanding here.
Absolutely.
The next time you walk through a quiet museum gallery and you stop in front of a massive abstract canvas, you aren't just going to look at the shiny surface anymore.
No, you're automatically going to start scanning the canvas, looking for those invisible anchors.
You'll look for the subtle thermal tensions that were placed weeks in advance just to support a single flash of light. You'll see the invisible foundations.
And this logic applies to so much more than just a canvas. It applies to everything we build. It's the invisible foundations, the grueling preparations that never receive any applause, that are the only things genuinely capable of sustaining the brilliance everyone eventually admires on the surface.
The masterpiece is just the evidence of the unseen work.
Beautifully said. Which leaves us with one final thought to chew on today. If the stunning surface of a masterpiece, and perhaps even our own greatest achievements in our lives and careers, is merely the final visible layer covering countless hidden adjustments, intense frictions, and deliberate dark shadows, what invisible layers are you building right now that no one else can see, but will ultimately be the very reason your masterpiece holds together?